an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering
Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood.
Episode 8, The Fifth Laboratory. In this episode, the boys have to face off these dudes who, it turns out, are also hollow suits of armor animated by souls, which I guess I kind of should have seen coming, but I didn't at all. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Max, if you're out there, what's up, buddy? So, guys, this episode, Al gets like a little, so here was how it was. Al gets attacked at the end of last episode. I'm like, but he saw the guy coming. It'll be fine. Inside, Ed is like, oh, he's going up against somebody who is not as good as you even are? He'll be fine. Everybody is like, no, don't worry about it. Al will be fine. But there is no armor to protect against psychological assault. We weren't ready for that one, kids. This dude he's fighting just goes for the very marrow of our existence as people. And just straight up, how do you know you were ever real? You might just be a puppet that your brother invented. You may never have even been alive. Like, how do you know, though? How do you know? How do you know? I am not mad at Al for having doubts about this because, I mean, there is no real evidence. You can say, oh, there's photos of you as kids. What is that? This Al? Is it even? To be honest, we're acting like it's the same Al. But we don't know either what got brought back from the other side. Like, you know, I just wasn't ready for this dude to come at him with something that was going to wedge into his brain and worm its way in the way that this does. It's just so toxic. And the fact that at the end of the in the middle of the last episode, Ed was like, hey, there's something that I've been kind of wanting to talk to you about. And then he just doesn't get a chance to say it, feeds in perfectly with this theory. Like, oh, maybe he wanted to tell me that I'm not actually real. Which, I just don't like thinking about this sort of thing even as a flesh and blood human being. I can't imagine when you don't even have a body anymore, how much more this would get to me. And I hate this because the thing that has been so constant with these two is that they are looking out for each other. They're on each other's side. And to have this sort of doubt, like, I don't think that it's going to cause Ed, like, to lose Al completely. I don't think Al's just going to turn on his brother. Al seems to have a decent amount of common sense, but it doesn't matter if it's true. If it affects the relationship in any way, it's going to do some kind of damage. And I think I've, wondered out loud on the show whether, like, exactly how much Al even knows about his brother's journey to whatever fucking dimension he went to. So he knows what Ed sacrificed to get him his soul back, but I don't know what else. I don't know, and it's just all, this is such a weird thing, you guys. This universe has like a lot going on that even the people in it don't understand. And honestly, I'm into that. You know, I am a big fan of universes, and I am putting an asterisk here. So there's two things that can be done. The first one is boring, and the first one is, here's the magical system. This is how it always works, except for this one person who's like the chosen one or something, who can do things not according to those rules because they are very special. Or there is a person who can do things not according to those rules because they are very evil and have forsaken morality, which means that you can do anything because you don't care. That is very boring. Then we've got the other way, which is everybody thinks that they know how the magical system in this universe works. And it turns out they don't. And there are some people who have been aware of the secret stuff for a while and been using it on the DL. And there are some people who are even finding an alternative to that that's like compelling and interesting and maybe exploiting that somehow. And it turns out, you know, the information that you were fed in the first book isn't actually how it all goes. This is part of Mistborn. This is part of Cradle, which I keep telling everybody to read. And it's just, for me, much more representative of the human experience because we don't know anything. And we keep trying to act like we know things. And anytime we're fed new information, there are certain types of people who will reject that because it's new information and they just can't handle that. But mostly, we're still like figuring a lot out. And so watching other characters who don't actually have a handle on everything either, it's like, okay, yeah, see, that's what life is like. Although I can understand the appeal of universes that know exactly how everything works all the time, because there is comfort in thinking that you know it all, you know? So because this universe has so many unknowns, and it's the kind of unknowns where, like, they don't have to be unknowns, but people don't want to talk about it, is the vibe that I'm getting. It leaves a million doors open. And I can't theorize at all because literally anything could be true. Anything could be real or not real because I don't have the metric to know. And it's grounded enough that that doesn't bother me. If something doesn't have a good enough grounding, not knowing what's real and what's not feels more like you're just unmoored and nothing really matters. And that kind of like, that started to happen for me with Doctor Who, where they could just pull whatever out of their ass at any time because there really weren't any rules, even though they tried to pretend there were rules until they got written into a corner and just had to do something. But this universe, it feels like having the law of equivalent exchange puts you into a particular like understanding of the transactional quality of magic. And then trying to get around that, it's like you're not only trying to circumnavigate the way that magic is supposed to work, but like low key, you are trying to scam the universe. Because you're trying to get something without giving anything. And that's just in general not how anything works. So I don't know. I like that. I think it's interesting. So anyway, I'm all right. I'm gonna start from the start, like I do. I don't actually. We'll be honest. All right. So we begin with the fight that recommences between Al and what is it? Number 48? No, 66. My bad. I think 48 is inside. And 66, we find out later, both 66 and 48 were serial killers. 48 calls himself a mass murderer. Is that the same thing as a serial killer? Because, like, when I think of the word mass murderer, I just, as Americans probably do, think of like a mass shooting. I think of like, you're killing a group of people mostly at the same time or within a very short time. And I just sort of like, you know, it's the same thing as somebody who assassinates people for a living. They've killed multiple people. That doesn't necessarily make them a serial killer because that has a different connotation to it, right? So I'm just kind of wondering about like the semantics of that, because it's not something that I'm particularly into. Despite having played a clip from Snapped before I started recording this episode, I am not into true crime stuff all that much. And I'm into serial killer stuff like even less, because I just think they want to be talked about. So can we just not do that for them? They like it. Stop it. So Michael says an aggregate killer, not a sequential killer. Oh my God. I mean, and it turns out too that there are two dudes in 48's armor, one for the head and one for the body. And I better wait. I better finish with Al first. So this guy that he's facing off with is he tries to kind of throw some like intimidation at Al, and I love this so much. He does this whole thing where he tells the story of who he is and winds up kind of like finishing his tale with a flourish and an expectant silence, because he thinks that Al is going to know who he is. And Al has never heard of him. And guys, there is something so amazingly funny about Al's genuine seeming like regret that he has never heard of this guy. Like, he seems to genuinely feel a little embarrassed to say, I'm really sorry. I never heard of you though. Like, Al is like sympathetic for this guy in a way that I don't think this joke would have worked nearly as well with a character that was being snide about it. You know, if somebody was like, well, I've never heard of you, it's just whatever, you know, there's something about that feels very expected. But to say it with this sort of, oh gosh, you know, I'm really sorry. It's just not ringing a bell for me. I could not. And this dude is so sad. I loved it so much. And this is what I'm talking about, you guys. Serial killers want us to talk about them. They like it. It's their thing. That's part of why they do it, is because they like to sit back and watch the chaos unfold and collect fucking articles about themselves and shit. So when you don't know who they are and have never heard of them, I feel like that's the best fucking weapon. Don't know anything about them. I think that we as a society get sort of fascinated with serial killers because, one, we think if we can understand them, then we can prevent ourselves from falling victim to a serial killer. Which, no, you can't. You just have to hope for the best. Any like assumption that you can control that sort of thing, it's got this unfortunate side effect of making it seem like maybe the victim could have saved themselves or something if they had just like, you know, no. And secondly, I think that we just want to distance ourselves as normal people, in quotes, from serial killers to like make ourselves feel a little bit better about the very ordinary type of shitty we are. Like, yeah, I may be like a garbage person, but I'm not a serial killer because the bar is so low. So anyway, this moment of him just not knowing, and it's a very different scenario from the guy inside that Ed is dealing with, because that dude is just like, I was a mass murderer, and that's it. Otherwise, he's like, all right, let's fight now. Let's fight. I've been wanting to fight. Let's do it. And he doesn't seem particularly wrapped up in his like reputation. He doesn't offer anything about what he used to do. I think he starts to brag a little bit in the midst of the fight, but it's not even really about the murders he committed so much as that, like, I like to be a predator and prey on people, and it's fun. And I haven't had somebody around in a while who's been, like, worth bothering with, so thanks for coming, kind of thing. That, for me, doesn't, like, hit the same. Barry the Chopper. Oh, my God, Ryan, I forgot. His name is Barry. I don't know why that's so great. I think it's because Barry just does feel like a really ordinary white guy name, somebody who works in accounting or something, you know? And that often does turn out to be the dude who's a serial killer. He seems like he's extremely ordinary, and then you just find out that he's got a basement full of bodies. And okay, Damien says, yeah, it seems like a serial killer is somebody who kills a lot of people over a long period of time with periods of rest. See Zodiac. Mass murderers do a bunch in one shot. Okay. Yeah, I guess I was right, but I don't know how I knew that. It was just sort of like the association with the words, I guess. So they get into their thing. We cut to Ed as he goes inside. And he sees this circle that has been cast, this massive alchemical circle. And there is a sort of stone pillar in the center that looks like a whole person could stand or sit on it. It's a really big circle. And there's blood spattered on it. And Al is standing there looking at it. Not Al, sorry, Ed, going, I guess this has to be what they've been experimenting using to make the Philosopher's Stone. And then all of a sudden, out of the darkness comes a voice going, yes, that's right. And I was like, oh man, I didn't expect this dude to like out himself so soon. And I'm glad he did in a way, because I just couldn't handle attention anymore. But also, guys, can we talk about the design of this guy? Because the other dude was weird enough, but once you see this full body, it is a weird choice. And I'm not sure why he has been designed this way, but all right, I'm going to screen share because I just need you guys to see the tidy little bow that he's got like these strings to tie what looks like a little like capelet or something around his shoulders. And there is a little bow that I feel like really makes everything hang together in a way. He's got a combo of regular clothing and armor that it feels like what they're trying to do in a way is make him look more human by giving him clothing. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why it matters if they look that human when nobody sees them. I don't get the impression these guys like go out into the world. And even if they did go out into the world in armor, it's not an unheard of thing to wear armor. I feel like this would attract more attention than otherwise because it's so strange. So I don't know what's going on, but this guy, he's got like the armor that it looks like, if we're going with the human underneath wearing armor, which is what we are still thinking at this point. It looks like a breastplate that has like a shrug over it, like a fabric green shrug. But on top of that are epaulets. And like the shrug is a hoodie, by the way. And so he's got his little like hoodie like tied in a bow. He's got a mask on because he's conscientious, although he does not social distance later, which I really think is problematic. And then around his waist, he's got a towel. It's a white. It looks like if you had just gotten out of the shower, except it's a little bit too high up on the body. And it's fastened with a chain that looks like something that you would like chain a boat to a dock with. Like it's gigantic chain. And there is a long feather or streamer coming off of his helmet that it looks like reaches pretty much to his waist. Just overall, the effect of this is really odd. And there is something, now that we're talking about it, that kind of gives me Zodiac a little bit, actually. Do you guys know about, like, the helmet that he wore and stuff sometimes? Yeah, I don't know if that is, like... Okay, so Kayla in the chat says it looks like it's based off real samurai armor, which is often metal pieces attached to cloth and tied together. Oh, interesting. Okay. Michael says wearing cloth reduces unpleasant noise if you bump into a door frame. I mean, I guess if these guys are supposed to be security and sneak around, cloth probably would make sense in that sense. Like, you're trying to be stealthy so that you can catch the enemy off guard. That's not bad. I'm willing to accept that too. Oh my God. Erica says Barry wasn't even clever enough to be alliterative and call himself Barry the Butcher. I can't believe that I didn't put that together. He would, like, it's right there. You're right, Erica. What the fuck? I'm going to go with the fact that it's just the translation. They missed an opportunity there because they weren't really thinking. But yeah, that is just a real missed opportunity. So, okay, if it's based on samurai armor, which I'm totally willing to accept, then either the people who make these suits are creating things to give a certain look before they put a soul in it, or they like put a soul in a basic armor and then they give them like an IKEA catalog full of potential parts that they could sub out, and this person can build themselves whatever body if they just order the parts, which I think sounds kind of dope, actually. Like, I don't know about you guys, but one of my favorite parts of starting any, like, video game is just customizing the character that you're going to be playing. Like, I've been playing Skyrim right now, and it's, like, the first time I've ever played it by myself. And it took me, like, a full day, to decide how to make my character look. So, I can only imagine the fun I would have if I could just, like, take body parts on and off and just be like, actually, I think that the big, giant, thick, intimidating, like, ape arms are what I want right now. So he comes in here and it is really alarming how quick he is. He comes in, he's like, oh yeah, you're figuring shit out, huh? And then he's like, oh, I see you're an alchemist. Zip! And he's like an inch away from Ed's face in a millisecond. And I got really nervous. It doesn't look like... I think that the show doesn't mean to make it look like he has a speed superpower. But I thought for a moment that's what we were dealing with. That this guy had some sort of like ability via the armor or via alchemy or something to increase his speed. And it turns out, I think that they were just trying to be like, oh, he's just like a huge drama queen, which is, that's fine. I mean, I respect that. So their fight begins and Al is realizing that shit is not what it looks like. He hits the guy in the chest with his blade, and there is a hollow ringing sound. And Ed is like, hold on. This is so familiar. Let me put my finger on it. You're hollow. And this dude is like, God, people don't usually like jump to that right away. But are there people like us outside? And Ed says, it makes me sick to think there's more than one idiot in the world who came up with the brilliant idea of bonding a disembodied soul to a suit of armor. I love that he's like lumping himself into the idiot category. I don't have great things to say about Ed's thought process a lot of the time, but I appreciate any moment when he stops and is like, God, I fucking suck for this. You know what? Ed, I'm not trying to like really be too hard on you regarding the original problem because you were a kid, but you do suck a little bit. Erica says you would love Monster Factory on YouTube. Erica, way ahead of you. If you guys don't know what Monster Factory is, because I was just talking about like, you know, creating your own characters. I think it's the McElroy brothers, if I'm not mistaken. They get together, seemingly pretty stoned, and they just go through different games and create the most like bonkers looking playable characters. And it shouldn't be as funny as it is, but it is. And if you're a little bit drunk or a little bit stoned when you watch them, it's even better. So highly recommend if you're just feeling like you need some cheering up, but you don't want to have to focus too hard. Really recommend those. So this guy says, perhaps I should introduce myself again. 48 is the number I was assigned when I was on death row when I had a living body. I was better known as Slicer, which again, like that's not great. You know, I feel like, guys, I've talked about like the nicknames that I would pick and stuff like that before. I've never really considered what I would pick for like a murderer. I've picked a name if I were like a mobster, which would be Natasha the Chins Winters, because I've got so many chins. So that would be that name, but that doesn't really work for like a serial killer name. So I gotta figure that out, I think. I gotta make a list and have it in notes on my phone so that if anything happens and I unexpectedly lose my mind and become a serial killer or, you know, whatever, that they have like a signed list of names that they're allowed to give me in the media that I have like sanctioned and said was okay. Because otherwise you don't know what they're going to come up with. I don't know if he picked Slicer or did the newspapers pick Slicer? Like, I don't know how much say you get in that sort of thing. The Zodiac Killer picked his own, I'm pretty sure, right? And then there's just like the BTK Killer, and it's just like the Bind to Torture Kill. And that's like, really? We're just going to make an acronym out of it? That's so lazy. So I don't know. I just think that we should all workshop this a little bit more. And this guy says that he was going to be executed and that they experiment with these people to make the Philosopher's Stones. But he doesn't really know anything about that. And, you know, there are times where I could be like, that's convenient. But honestly, why would they tell him literally anything? Like, that's fine. And he says they just recognized my skills, gave me this body, and made me their trusty guard dog. And Ed is like, oh, yeah, they must have given you a seal, too. And he says, oh, yes, I do have a blood seal. And he lifts up his visor to show it to Ed. And Ed is like, it's weird that you would just show me where it is. It's like your weak spot. I don't know why you would give me that advantage. And he's like, well, I haven't had a good fight in a minute, and I'd like to give myself a bit of a challenge. So I'll, you know, hand you the target you can focus on, and then we'll see how you do. Now, Candace says, I would be so disappointed if I went through all the trouble of becoming a serial killer and the media gave me a dumbass name like Candy the Rapper. Candace, I promise you, if you ever become a serial killer, I will plant the seed of a good nickname on your behalf. You can feel free to give me your suggestions, but I mean, we could do something like Hard Candy, but that's like a pretty famous movie. We could do Poison Candy. I mean, candy doesn't have to factor into it, but I do like the juxtaposition of like Killer Candy. Wait, is that it? I kind of like that. It's very simple, but it does have like a pop to it. I don't know. Anyway, okay. So this moment here I find sort of weird. The two of them, they get into this fight, and they're pretty, I want to say evenly matched, but honestly, he is better than Ed. Like, Ed, it's a very, very close thing here. And Ed winds up taking the head off the armor. And he takes the head off, and the body keeps moving around. And Ed says, that's impossible. No, it's not. I don't understand this, guys, because his brother has had his head off and is walking around. Right? Am I wrong about that? Like, I feel like his brother has, like, gone and picked his head up and put it back on. Am I making that up and imagining that? I don't know if it's, like, the placement of the seal is different with his brother, so it works for him, but it shouldn't work for this guy. But I just didn't understand Ed's reaction, because it seems like that's something we've seen before a couple of times. Ryan says it's because the guy's blood seal is on his head, so he thought if it was separated, he couldn't move the body. Okay, so when we've seen Al lose his, the head doesn't move, the body goes and picks it up because the body is what has the seal, in Ed's case. Okay. All right, okay. I didn't really know that was a rule, but that's good to know. That makes sense. So, yeah, it turns out that these murderers were a pair of brothers, which, like, I feel that's a real ripoff. You get put in a body with your brother. You don't even get your own two separate bodies. I mean, I would be very annoyed by that. It doesn't really feel worth it to me. I guess they did everything together. If they, like, murdered together, they were probably pretty close. So maybe they like it. Maybe they asked for it. What do I know? But I do think that it's sort of an odd choice, and I wonder how much they can, like, talk to one another, because the suit does talk separately. So I guess they could just, like, sit and have a conversation with themselves. What a weird thought. I wonder what it's like. Just echoes a lot, I bet. So this fight, we get cut away from to see Hughes, who is on the phone talking to somebody about his delightful family, because his daughter Alicia is about to turn 3, and he cannot stop talking about it. He's calling Roy to tell him, and Roy is like, yeah, I know, I'm at work. Can you not, please? And I love it when Roy says, stop calling me to gush over your daughter. And Hughes says, I mean, I'm not just over my daughter. I'll gush over my wife too. And guys, I actually watched the post-credit scene this time, where Hughes is like, hey, Roy, you might be in line for a promotion. And if you are promoted and you're this young, you may get some enemies. So you probably want to watch your back, and you want somebody on your side. And to that end, get married. And Roy is so annoyed. And I thought that was pretty cute, actually. I like it. Although I have to say, I still have my eye on you, Mr. Hughes. You're a little bit too adorable for your own good. I don't know if I trust you. Oh, he was a real family man. So friendly. Yeah. Oh, was he? Was he? So, this is, I know you're dying to gush over your very own scar-faced Ishvalan. And Roy says, we've found many bodies on the site where he vanished, but all of them are so decomposed that it's been difficult to identify them. So are these all people that he had killed that they didn't even know about? Like people that he had taken their bodies down into the sewers? Or is this supposed to be the work of lust and gluttony? Although gluttony would have eaten them, right? Like they wouldn't still be around. So I guess Scar was killing It's just surprising because it seemed like the point that Scar was making in killing state alchemists was based on public viewing of whatever message he was sending. Like, there's not the same point to killing people in private and hiding their bodies just so that people are like, oh, they disappeared and we don't know where they are. I thought he wanted it to be like a big thing so that everybody knew what he was up to and who he was after and sow fear and discontent, you know? But, okay. Damien says, I think they're casualties of the explosion/fight. I didn't even think of that. I think because I just didn't like see that many people in it. But that makes sense. I mean, it was a pretty gigantic explosion. So I'm willing to accept that. Okay. Yeah. That sucks. God. Can you imagine just like, it's one thing, guys, today in Pittsburgh, a bridge collapsed and like nobody died, thank God. But Joe Biden is visiting Pittsburgh tomorrow to talk about his infrastructure proposal. And a bridge collapsed in the city today. I shouldn't laugh, but fuck. I just, like, what else can I do? But, you know, it's one thing, infrastructure's weakening, like, that's bad enough. But if you find out that you got hurt because of, like, a fight between these assholes, how mad would you be? I swear to God, I would just fucking track those people down. In the afterlife, I would just be sitting next to the door waiting for them, checking my watch. So, yeah, he says he hasn't been spotted anywhere. Many people think it's most likely that he's dead. I mean, I don't see why. Just don't behave like he's dead. I just don't think that's a good idea. And Hughes immediately is like, oh, that's good news. I can lift the bodyguards from Ed and Al. And it's too soon, man. Don't do that. Or are you doing that because you're shady? Huh, Hughes? Oh, how convenient. I guess I'll just get rid of these bodyguards for these boys. Who cares, right? I got my eye on you, Hughes. So this is when we see what's going on with the protective detail. A couple of his men, Armstrong's men, have taken over because the other two have been, as they put it, played. The boys snuck out of their window in the middle of the night, and these two only began to notice that it was like suspiciously quiet and came to check, and there is a rope going out of the window. And it is extremely embarrassing for these two. They say something like, he didn't even stop to think how this would make us look. And I was like, he barely stops to think about how things make him look. So that tracks. And I can't wait to see if we ever see Armstrong's reaction to this, because he like gave them a direct order to not fucking do exactly what they wound up doing. And I really like these two guards talking about how Armstrong's going to take his shirt off and yell at us again. Because I think that in my head, every time we've seen Armstrong like suddenly get huge and his shirt's gone and his eyes turn into red lasers, I've always thought that that was meant to just be like, just the energy he's giving off in that moment, not that he's actually got no shirt on or grown very large. But because of the way they're saying this now, I'm assuming he takes his shirt off every time he yells at anybody or like gets over emotional and embraces them. That's actually happening instead of it just being a sort of illustrative device. And that is hilarious. Like, that makes me think of the dudes from Jersey Shore, and they would just find any excuse to show their abs off, and just they would take their shirts off, or they would do that thing where they lift the front of the shirt and put it behind the back of their neck so that they have their shoulders and arms still covered, but their abs and chest are exposed, which I always found like kind of a weird thing. A lot of dudes in porn do that also, and I'm not really sure what they're going for. Because, like, you may as well just take your shirt off. Why not just take it off? But anyway, I love the idea that Armstrong has been literally doing this, because I was not taking it literally, and I'm fine with it. So then we have the fight continuing with Al and this dude, and this is when we get a bit of the consequences of Winry saying that she was going to make the arm less strong but more rust resistant. And I stand by my irritation with that. It doesn't seem like she asked. And I feel like if Ed were to be asked, what do you prefer? Being like rust resistant or having a strong arm? I feel like he'd pick strong, and I feel like most of us would pick strong. You just go with a stronger option, and then just go pick up a can of like clear coat Rust-Oleum or something and just give that a spritz and you're set. It's fine. You just handle it on your own. Just some maintenance. Get one of those like wire brushes and really like nice microfiber cloth and a little bit of a rub, and you don't need to compromise the structural integrity and strength of an arm that's really a weapon. And like I said in that scene, he lost the arm and leg in a fight. So the idea that you can just be like, don't do anything crazy. He works for the state, and it's his job to do crazy shit now. So give him adequate protection for that. I don't like, it just doesn't, it's not logical to me. So this is when the guy tries to sort of like get Ed off his game by mentioning how his brother is being attacked outside. And Ed starts laughing and is just like, well, like, I have never beaten my brother in a sparring match, so it'll be fine. And guys, I'm going to screen share again, because Barry is coming at Al in this scene, and he's just yelling, "Let me cut you up, you big bag of bolts." And he's got his arms spread, and he's like racing at him, and he looks so funny. He looks like a bear a little bit, and also like he's wearing one of those sort of mascot suits that you see at like Disney World or somewhere, because it looks like that's not, he just looks ungainly. Things look out of proportion to one another. And there's something almost adorable about him. I don't know what it is, but I feel like if I got a little figurine of this guy, I wouldn't be mad about it, because it's kind of cute. You know, like, look at his weird hair. It's funny. He's sort of like, I don't know. I like him. So this dude is getting frustrated, and this is when we have the whole moment of him explaining how he became a serial killer. And honestly, the animation from this segment is pretty dope. I rather enjoyed this. I don't know how many of you saw the second Venom movie. I highly recommend it. It's stupid. I loved it. And there is a section in that where they do a very similar, like, I'm going to animate the growth of a serial killer thing. And it's not the same kind of animation overall, but the effect is very similar. And I think it's really, really well done. It manages to be super creepy without it feeling like they're trying too hard. I don't know. I just like it. And I'm, like I said, I'm not really into serial killer stuff. So yeah, so this is when he does his whole, like, we haven't even reached the good part. Barry isn't actually dead, you see. And I'm like, Barry, of course you're not. We know it's you. He's acting like, and look at this, guys. Oh my God. Look at he's doing a little pirouette. He's so excited. Look at how proud of himself he is. Can we talk about that moment where he like throws his arms out and it's a bunch of chicken legs? Is that what that is? I'm going to pause it. Guys, look. Okay, it's not chicken legs. It's like that anime meat. I guess because he's a butcher? Is that why? That is so funny. I love this. See, I really like this little guy. I don't know, Barry. I think you're kind of cute. Look at you. It's almost like he's got a glutton thing going on, you know? I think it's funny. But yeah, so here's the moment where Al says, sorry, I've never heard of you. And he just... oh, God. And yeah, it basically boils down to him being like, but you should at least be scared. Like, even if you don't recognize my name, I just told you that I'm a giant serial killer who likes cutting human flesh into lots of pieces of, you know. So this is when he asks Al, what happened to his body, freak? And Al says, hey, that's impolite. Which I just never want Al to change at all. That's rude. I find impolite somehow funnier. I think it's just because it hasn't been done as much. And then he settles with, oh, I see. You were on death row too. You startled me for a minute there. And that's when Al takes offense. And we get into the fucking thing. He explains about losing his body when his brother was trying to transmute his mother and blah, 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 blah. And this dude starts laughing. And he says, are you sure you and your brother are really related? And Al misunderstands and says, I guess we don't look that much alike anymore. And he's like, no. I mean, are you sure that you're not a puppet created and controlled by your so-called brother? Were you ever even a real person to begin with? And Al is like, I was Alphonse and Rick, and I have all these memories. And there's an old lady in my village who knows who I am. And this dude is like, well, they could be implanted memories. And those people could be in on it. And there's really a lot of pretty solid explanations for why those things could still be true and not be true in the way that you think they're true. And I was like, this is horrifying. I just never considered this aspect of it. And I'll say, just for the record, I know I said in the beginning, like, we don't even know if this isn't true. I don't think this is true. Okay? I think it's definitely Al's soul. There's just no reason for it to be anything else. If it isn't, it's not like I'm going to be like mad about it. But I just don't think it's, but in this moment, I would definitely be feeling the same way that Al is and starting to like wonder shit, because honestly, Ed isn't super great about using his abilities responsibly a lot of the time. And I could see like sort of starting to eyeball some of his actions and being like, is this really, like, he wouldn't do that, right? And you have to start to convince yourself of it. I don't want it to be so easy to get in Al's head, though. And I can't tell with this serial killer whether or not he even thinks this is a thing. I think he's just fucking with Al. I don't think he actually believes this is true. I think he's frustrated at the fact that Al did not have the terrified reaction that he should have had. And now he's just trying to get a little bit of his own back by undermining the kid's confidence because he's a good fighter and this dude does not like losing. So I'm going to put it down to that. That said, where did this dude get this idea? Because this isn't something that anybody has proposed. You know, how do we know that's even Al's brother? Nobody's asked this question. Everyone has just taken it for granted that these two are who they say, and that the way Ed has said it happened is the way it happened. And there was nobody else there. And, you know, so there's like no witnesses to it. We can't even count Al as a witness because he was like basically the first thing to go. So this dude puts this possibility out there as if this is something that he has seen before. And I'm not sure that's actually true. It's just the energy I'm getting is, well, how do you know you're not like this other thing I've seen? And I don't like the idea of that one bit, that you could just like remotely control a robot, like armor suit. Because if you can do that, depending on like the abilities associated with that, you have got the potential to like create a small army if you are able to focus on more than one person at a time. Like, I just don't like the idea of being able to make these puppets. Call me crazy. It's got very heavy Westworld vibes in this as well. Those of you who have not seen Westworld, I recommend watching the first season. And after that, it's a lot less good. It's still interesting, but the first season truly shines. And I covered it with Rashawn. So if you are interested, our coverage is out there. I was the unspoiled one for it. Rashawn had seen it already. So yeah, the fact that this episode ends with Al still thinking about this suggestion, it gets me extremely sad because I don't want to watch this kid go through the next, I don't know, maybe just the next episode. I'm praying that he has the conversation with Ed in the next episode, that he actually talks to Ed about it. My main fear is that he's going to let this sort of eat away at him, and he isn't going to ask the question directly because he worries that Ed won't even give him an honest answer. So what's the point? At least ask, because even if he isn't giving you an honest answer, the way he reacts is going to tell you something. But I just don't know. I don't know if this is the kind of show that would take this sort of doubt and milk it for all it's worth, like a soap opera would. You know, a soap opera, they would plant this seed at the beginning of the season and they would drag the shit out for a whole season. And like, you'd go back and forth like 60 times on whether it was true or not. And then there's other shows where they would like, you know, the one that always comes to mind for me as always having moved way faster than I expected is Orphan Black. And I would like theorize about all this stuff with Owen when we covered it. And then the next episode, it would all be answered and we'd be like, oh, I thought this was going to be like a major arc. And it's just, oh, okay. So I am hoping that's how this is, that I get a sudden answer that I wasn't expecting so soon, because I can't bear it. I truly can't, guys. It's so sad. This kid has been through so much already. All he's got left is his brother. He doesn't even have his own body anymore. And if his faith in his brother is shaken too, that's not fair. It's just not fair. I don't want that for him. So I'm just going to put that on the table here, guys. If this takes a lot longer than I hope to resolve, I'm going to complain about it, and I hope that you're ready for that complaint. So just putting that out there. Okay. So this is when Ed is seeing the body walking around, and he's like, that is impossible. How can that even be happening? And he eventually like cuts them up enough that they can't move. And these guys are like, well, just destroy the blood seals. Go ahead and kill us then. What are you doing? And Ed says, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not taking a life. And they are like, well, I mean, we're not even like really people even. I don't think most people would say that this counted as taking a life. And Ed is like, my brother is in the same situation you're in, and I think he's a person. So absolutely not. No, I will not do that. And 48 is like so taken aback by the fact that Ed is going to treat him with any humanity that he says, oh, well, in that case, I'll tell you who made the Philosopher's Stone and ordered us to guard this place. And then in walks Lust, and she shoots her daggers across the room, spears the helmet, pulls it back toward her, and just breaks the seal. It's a pretty dramatic entrance that I like a lot. I am very curious about like Lust's being able to make these blades. They're like black. They don't look like metal. Is that her one gift, or can she do other stuff? I feel like we've seen her do this before, right? I think she did this with the priest. And I'm just not entirely sure what the restrictions are for these beings. And then we have Envy come in. And Envy is in the same form. The, like, what I keep thinking of as a aerobics instructor form. And the suit on the ground is seeing his brother get shattered. And Envy comes over and just repeatedly stabs the blood rune and is like, you almost killed one of our most important sacrifices. What would we have done then? Huh? And the killing of this thing is actually pretty brutal because he's like jerking and twisting and sort of convulsing the way that a real body would when she's stabbing him. So it makes it just this moment that feels gory, even though it isn't. And she comes over to Ed and just stares down at him. And he's like, oh, right. Well, I'm gonna go at it with you too. And then his arm malfunctions. Guys, it's so embarrassing. I feel so bad. It just like goes limp by his side. And Lust just says, technical difficulties? Oh my God. This is the sort of thing that like a woman would say to a dude who couldn't get it up. Having some tech problems there? You want me to call IT? Is there something we could do about that? This is just, and also Envy says that he's a pipsqueak, which he gets very mad about, and runs up and is like, lucky me, as his arm fails, and just decks him in the stomach, and then drags him outside by the hair. I should mention, I don't actually know Envy's pronouns. Later on, when she comes outside, I think somebody calls her he. So I don't know if I'm misreading or if Envy is purposely sort of androgynous and it's like meant to be that you can go either way. I probably should just kind of go with they from here on, I guess. It didn't even occur to me that you could see Envy as a dude. It just, that they came across for me as a woman. But then I'm pretty sure somebody calls them he outside. So that made me stop and go, oh, I might be way off on this. I think it's also the voice that's doing it as well. So this ends with, there's a slow pan up to the ceiling. And as they pan, I'm feeling like the symbols that we're seeing on this massive thing on the wall look pretty similar to whatever was on the door that we saw when Ed went over to the other side. So it says, Filius Redemptor et Mediator. I don't want to like Google this because I bet it would just be pure spoilers for this show. But yeah, it just like kind of hit for me. I was like, this looks really, really familiar. Okay. Damien says Envy goes by male pronouns most of the time, but Envy doesn't really seem to care. Gotcha. And we go back outside. We see Al having his like moment of just introspection and really not knowing how to handle things. And it looks like Barry is going to get the best of him. And Barry lifts his chopper and gets it shot right out of his hand because here come these two guards. And I love Barry just says, this isn't going quite as I planned. He seems truly just sort of like befuddled. There's just a little bit of like, what do I do now? This is not what I pictured, actually. And all of a sudden, this building begins to crack and fall apart. Because Lust was basically like, okay, they found this place. Shit very, very nearly went real wrong. We better get rid of it because we can't use it anymore. That's for fucking sure. And Ed is still in there. So first, Barry the Chopper is just like, oh, I'm going to get the fuck out of here. And he starts running off. One of the guards goes chasing after him. Al is determined to try and go into the building to save Ed. But then there's a massive explosion like right through the wall. And Envy comes walking out carrying Ed on his shoulder. And very cheerfully says, you might want to get him to a hospital as soon as you can. And also might want to keep an eye on him and stop him from taking these crazy risks. He's a precious resource. I don't like the sound of that at all. I didn't like the sound of him being a sacrifice, but being a resource sounds worse. I don't know why. I think it's because a sacrifice, that's done. That's over. You kill somebody, they're the sacrifice, they serve their purpose, and it's done, and they don't have to suffer anymore. But when you call somebody a resource, that makes me feel like you're keeping them alive, and you're going to make them suffer. You know? I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. So, yeah. This is when Ross is like, all right, well, we got to get him out of here, and you should go too, and turns to say something to Envy, and Envy is already long gone. I really want to know, does Envy run away, or does Envy just sort of evaporate? Like, how does Envy make an exit? Meanwhile, right next door, all of the prisoners are kind of freaking out, because obviously an entire building right next door is fucking imploding, and there is a dude in a cage that is like, oh, the sound of a building exploding. That is so comforting. I would say it's probably the Fifth Laboratory because it's like right next door. But can't you feel how it like reverberates through your body? And the guard is like, yo, stop it. Shut up in there. And he says, oh, excuse me, I was just recalling the Ishvalan War of Extermination, and it put me in such a good mood. And then we slowly pan up over his face, and we see it's that creepy guy with the long hair who was smiling and enjoying himself during the genocide. Pretty sure it's the same guy that we saw in the flashbacks. And he has a couple of what look to be runes on his palms as well as his wrists in very thick. It's like handcuffs isn't even the right word. It's like he's got stocks basically around his wrists, which I'm assuming the runes are to stop his alchemy from working. And I'm real curious about what it was that he finally got put in prison for. If committing genocide was fine and part of an assignment. If he got put in jail, I think it has to be pretty fucking bad. But, you know, genocide under orders is just a totally different beast than murder on your own time. So, who knows? Let's see. Ryan says everyone else called it the Ishbal Civil War, and he called it the Ishbal War of Extermination. Yeah, and that's what it was, based on the information that we've gotten. He was like, "Oh, they keep on rioting and pushing back, so we're just going to completely annihilate that area." I mean, it sounds like this guy's being a lot more honest about what it actually was. Granted, it's not like he's doing it to be political. He's not, well, they call it this, but they should really call it this. He's just like, no, that's what it was, and it was awesome. I loved it. It was so sick. And I don't like it. So, yeah. That is the end of the episode. All right, I'm over time, as I usually am. But thank you guys again very much for coming and hanging out with me tonight. Thank you to Max for commissioning this episode. Appreciate you all feeding me information in the chat. And I will be seeing you on Tuesday with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.